Prime Minister, as you read about yourself in the press or in press digests or in books or hear people talk about you, what is it you feel that they miss? As you hear or read these things, what is it you think, there's one quality about me they always ascribe to me that's not true, or one they always miss? What would you add to the public perception or take away?
I have to, and maybe it looks like an evasion of the question, but I have to begin by saying that I don't read very much what people say about me or what they write about me. I'm somewhat, I guess, defensive when they accuse me of being arrogant, and that in itself is funny because the cliche exists and it stays. But basically, I'm not a defenseless person, but I like to be gentle with people. I don't like to be arrogant with them, and I would guess that my aggressiveness, sometimes appearing as arrogance, is generally in response to some rather strong provocation.
Is the repeated thing of use of the word arrogant, do you think, due to the fact that you're either shy or reserved or suffer fools gladly or slightly tactless about other people's feelings?
I wouldn't think it's any of those because I enjoy people's company insofar as they're not deliberately offensive to me. I suppose if I have any one failing in that regard is that though I'm meek by nature, I tend to disguise myself as being overly meek in the hopes that somebody will punch me in the nose so I can have the pleasure of punching them back. Does that make sense?
It does. Life would be a bit boring without the opportunity to punch someone on the nose from time to time.
I like the verbal, intellectual exchanges and very often the bodily ones. You know, I used to like judo a great deal and boxing, and I guess there is an element of aggressivity in myself, in me anyhow, and it's generally kept, I would think, under control, except when people hit out at me, I just hit back.
Were you convinced, as some people say early on, that you were not very, very bright, but that you, or strong, but that you were actually weak and unbright when you were small?
I wouldn't put it in such negative terms. I didn't think I was unbright, but I realized quite, there's a point in your teens somewhere when you realize that some people are geniuses and others are not, and I realized that I wasn't amongst the geniuses, and I'd have to work harder if I wanted to perform with some degree of excellence. And I think that applies to my health and physical well-being. I certainly realized I wasn't very handsome and nor very strong physically or strong in health sense. So I perhaps tended to take care of my health and smoke less or drink less than if I had been a giant of a man.
The other adjectives that I found reading about you more than you've read about yourself, the other ones that cropped up were reserved, competitive, parsimonious, solitary, lucky, and charismatic. Would you accept those?
Well, I don't want you to go through the list again, but let me try and see. What was the second one that struck me?
Reserved, competitive.
Competitive. I don't think I am competitive. I was, I suppose, till I was about 18 or 20. But very soon I discovered that the game wasn't to be better than the other person, but it was to be your best rather than be the best. So in that sense, I don't think I am competitive in the conventional sense.
What about solitary and charismatic?
Solitary, I think so. It goes with the rest of the character traits I was describing. I think in a sense I I am my judge, and for that reason I am also, I hope, to a large degree my master, and that means that I don't need other people's approval, and to a certain degree I don't need their company. If I can have it, that is fine, but I don't feel deprived if I spend long periods alone. Charismatic? I just can't look at that objectively. Sometimes I have to think that there is another persona there, that he is the Prime Minister, and people are a little bit awed by him, or spiteful or vengeful, but it is almost someone else. Me personally, I'm not charismatic. If I play the role of Prime Minister, or if that role takes over, I can be all these things, I suppose, arrogant, aggressive, maybe charismatic, and so on. But
it's generally said that if the comeback had not occurred in February of 1980 and people had judged your record as Prime Minister purely up through 79, that they would have said that in a sense you were a failed hero, in the sense that you were a hero to the Canadian public, not all the time, but a lot of the time, but that apart from, say, bilingualism and one or two other things, that you'd left no lasting legacy, but that now, with the resurrection or the rebirth or whatever, you've had an opportunity to finish off some of the things that were themes of your work, with the Constitution, the referendum, the national energy policy, and so on, so that now you have a legacy. But without the good luck of 79, 80, there would have really been no Trudeau legacy.
I don't believe that, and I don't believe that there will be that there will necessarily be a legacy, because there has been a resurrection, as you say. There is a cut-off point in every man's career, and according to whether you are partial or impartial or objective or non-objective, I guess you can add it up one way or another. In 74, I was far from certain that I wanted to run again in 78 or 79. And that I did run again was, in a sense, unpredictable, and it had more to do with the election of the Parti Québécois and its referendum and so on. But I may be freer now because it's more certain now that I'm not going to run again, but who knows? Something might happen that I'll have to run again. I hope this is not taken as a warning of something which is likely, but I was trying in those days to govern for the times as I am today, so I don't think I would have been all that influenced by...
When you say that you might have to run again, you mean that you would not rule it out unequivocally now?
Well, I have ruled it out in my own mind, but to be perfectly honest, when I was elected in 74, I had also ruled it out in my own mind. I didn't say it with as much brutal frankness. I felt I had to say that in 80 because, after all, I had resigned from the leadership of the party, and I had to look as though there was a time in my life when politics would be over. And also my children are growing up, and there are young people coming up in the party that I think should be given a chance. So I am more certain of resigning now than ever before.
But not positive?
Well, I've always said if there is a snap election and somehow we have to respond to it, not that I would have provoked it, but if there is a snap election and the party is caught in an election and we don't have time for a leadership convention, I suppose I would accept the draft. And mind you, I'm not a draft. I suppose I have no choice but to run again. But it is something that I am not hoping for, and something that I am certainly not planning or contemplating.
And if the Parliament runs close to its full course through to early 85, it's still possible you might run again?
I would say not. In that case, there's no contingency in my mind where I would run again. Everything is possible, but it's not lurking there as a secret desire or a secret plan.
I think, although probably you wouldn't have thought so back in 65 and 68 when you had to be persuaded, or again in 79, because you've always prized freedom. But if the reports of what life was like for you during the few months you were out of office in 79 are anything to go by, I mean, power does become addictive, the way of life becomes addictive. People said that you suffered withdrawal symptoms. If you were to leave, there would be a pretty painful decompression period, however much you went out in the wild outdoors or whatever, wouldn't there?
I don't think so, David. And I think people who saw withdrawal symptoms really don't know me very well. There may have been withdrawal symptoms of Trudeau the politician. I can't say honestly that I loved my role as leader of the opposition, but I sure enjoyed my freedom. And in that summer, there was several weeks in the great outdoors canoeing down the wild rivers of the Arctic, and there was time spent with my children, and there was a sudden rediscovery of freedom and I guess lack of pressure, which not only I enjoyed, which I think kept me going. If I hadn't had that 8 months in opposition, I don't think I would be feeling healthy and ready for a fight on the Constitution or energy or on the economy after I had been elected. That's, in a sense, if we had won the 79 election, even if I had assumed that it was my last one, I dare say I wouldn't have had the fight in me after 11 years of being Prime Minister that I had, because I had this 6-8 months rest. So there was no withdrawal. There was perhaps a return to the private individual and a bit of the solitary person you were describing, but I can't remember any sadness or withdrawal symptoms.
But Henry Kissinger did say that power is the greatest aphrodisiac of all. Presumably aphrodisiacs cause withdrawal symptoms. I'm not sure about the medical quality of that.
But I'm not that erotic a person that I need aphrodisiacs. I can, if the stimulation isn't in the object or in the reality, why look for an aphrodisiac? It's like another. It even used in imagery terms. It's another form of drug, isn't it? And I don't believe in those kind of artificial stimulants. I like my job, but I also like philosophy, and I like canoeing down wild rivers, and I like art, and I like women, and I like life, and politics is a good job. It's a fun job.
What would you say has been, as you look back, and you've still got plenty of time to look forward to, but I mean, so far, what would you say has been the most exhilarating moment of your life?
Was a psychologist, this kind of question. At what age does a person suddenly discover that he is free and he is responsible for his decisions, whether they be right or wrong, and he has to pay for them, or he will be rewarded by a claim or whatever it is for whatever he is doing. I feel fortunate that it happened to me around the age of 30. I think in many people it happens later, if at all, but those who are fortunate, some great poets reached their peak at the age of 18. Rimbaud, the genius was there soon. And me, I a late bloomer, as you put it.
But you said you were quoted as saying on one occasion that you hoped that your children would not make the same mistakes you did. If that's an accurate quote, what did you have in mind?
I don't know what I had in mind. Maybe it was just a general statement that things that I did wrong, whether it be the way to jump on a trampoline or the books I went to, or maybe I'm just hoping that I will be able to help them and say, don't do it this way, do it that way. I suppose if I wished anything for my children, it would be that they perhaps develop into a whole person a little younger than I did at 30, without the extreme rigor and even a sense of intolerance for people with other values that I had when I was a teenager. I think nowadays people accept more easily that other values can be right for somebody else.
How would you describe the joys of fatherhood? For the first time, particularly.
I guess it's a large part of that joy is the amazement of the miracle of life, that suddenly it's there. There is another human being which is different from you and from the child's mother, and who is going to develop into a human being someday. I think it's the awesomeness of creation in which we participate when we become parents. Any creation is awesome, isn't it? I mean, yeah. A beautiful poem, a beautiful piece of music, a beautiful painting, a beautiful plant. How does it grow from a seed, you know? And it's there and it's beautiful, but suddenly these are objects, these are things, these don't have a life of their own, but suddenly there's a human being created who will have a life of his own or her own, and who will in turn create beauty and eventually other children. I think all that is present, and I think it is only understood fortunately by people who do have children, because if those who don't understood that, they would be terribly sad at having missed out on it. But
the world would be massively overpopulated.
Maybe. But certainly until the age of 50, more or less, I guess I didn't know about this marvelous feeling. And when you can share in it, that is a great event, and it makes you eternally grateful for the miracle of life and for the mother that bore these children. It's something stupendous.
Does it really dwarf your political career now?
Unfortunately not in terms of actual events. I spend still enormously more time with my political career than I do with my children. But it certainly has a lot to do with the intention I have of not remaining in politics very much longer, because I want to see these young boys grow up into pre-teenagers and then teenagers and hopefully beyond, and give them what time they deserve. And I realize that the longer I wait, the less they will need me, and the less I will be able to give them.
You said once about your own parents, my father taught me order and discipline, and my mother taught me freedom and fantasy. As probably the world's most well-known single parent, in a sense, do you try to teach all four?
Order and discipline, I think I managed to teach them. They are reasonably well behaved or well brought up boys. What is their freedom and fantasy? I think I teach them that too. I have a lot of fun with them, and I teach them to be creative. But I would suspect that they will learn more about freedom in the time they spend with their mother than in their time they spend with me.
Do you think the separation has lost anything from their lives?
I can't say. I can't honestly say. I don't think it's a question you can answer in the absolute. It's obviously better that children have two parents, but there are no absolutes, and the parent may die or the separation may take place, and my father died when I was in my first teens, and it was a tragedy, but life goes on, and I think any breaking up of a family unit is a tragedy, but every event can serve to help the development of a child as well as to hinder it, and it depends how the event is dealt with.
What would you pick in politics, Prime Minister, as your greatest achievement so far and your biggest mistake so far?
Well, the only satisfactory answer I've given to the first questions is to quote Talleyrand and say, I've survived. And I don't know if I have to elaborate on that, but it is an achievement, I think, in this turbulent society and changing world with very, very difficult times and challenges, to have managed to keep our party with its values hopefully corresponding to the Canadian general will a long time in office. I think that's something of an achievement. And what is my greatest disappointment?
Mistake.
Mistake. If you're talking politics now, I guess it was a tactical mistake. It was not to call an election in the fall of '77 because we probably would have won it then. But that's merely a tactical view. If we had won it, maybe, as I was saying earlier, I wouldn't have had the energy to go ahead, or maybe it wouldn't have been the time to do the Constitution or the energy things. So it is a tactical error as a politician. But
I think it was either James Callaghan or George Brown who said to me that if a politician's right 5 times out of 10, he's okay, and if he's right 6 times out of 10, he's a hero. Where would you put your own average?
I don't know, I suppose average 5 or 6 times out of 10.
And you have thus, Prime Minister, confounded the prediction that everybody makes, that you find it impossible to admit error. But you don't find it impossible to admit error 4 or 5 times out of 10.
I said 5 or 6 times out of 10.
No, it's therefore error 4 or 5 times out of 10.
Right.
You have...
Sorry, I made a mistake.
That's 5 out of 10. Are there in a politician's life remarks that you wish that you could call back in the heat of combat? Remarks you'd like to rewrite?
I don't suppose in the heat of combat, no. I think that there are some of my ironical remarks or remarks that I meant as a means of starting reflection, which when taken in isolation have done me a fair amount of damage. So in that sense, if it were to be done again, I would have used another method to elicit response or reflection.
What springs to mind? Do you mean sort of the famous...
I'm sure you've got them all, the famous ones.
Well, the famous... I was trying to think how to say it, actually. The famous bleeding hearts quote, or your unusual dietary instructions to postal drivers.
I don't think the latter is of any consequence. It was used tactically by a union which was badly led and which was dead wrong and which led its members into the ground. And I feel as a tactical victory on their part. But 10 times a day in the House of Commons we score tactical victories or receive tactical defeats, and I don't consider them a great moment. The bleeding hearts remark? No, I think it was a severe judgment of my critics, which looked at objectively, I think I would still make today.